Xernona Clayton, how you doing?
Well, with you, what do you expect? I'm doing great.
Well, it's
You
good
make
to
me
see you.
feel good.
It's always good to see you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So let's start. What was the moment, or was there a moment when you decided this is when I need to get involved in this movement, this civil rights movement, this black freedom movement?
Yeah, I was sheltered as a child. My father talked about people in general, that you'll be running into moments when you'll be restricted with your mobility. But don't ever, ever, ever let anybody restrict your ability. So no, there'll be limitations. I thought he was just talking about people in general. Went to college and
Tennessee
in
State.
Nashville, Tennessee State, yes. And things were going okay. But one night, four of us students went out. On the way back to the dorm, we said, let's get some hamburgers. And we stopped at a White Crystal. And I always will say that because I'll never eat another Crystal again. We walked in, we had money in our pockets. All we wanted was a hamburger. The guy was by himself. I don't know his owner, manager, whom, it didn't matter. But he said he had a big butcher knife. And he used the N word, and I don't mind using it. I hope you don't
Go right ahead.
object. He said, if you niggers don't get out of here, I'm going to cut your heads off. You know you don't belong in here, so get out. Well, of course we did, but the pain was inside of you. It still is today. Because he said two things that bothered me to this day is you don't belong here. I've felt that piercing word many, many times, belonging. What prevents me from belonging? I realized after, I knew what was going on, put it all, I wasn't completely naive, but the reality hit. I knew that I was black in America, and there's nothing I could do to pretend like I wasn't. So I knew then every opportunity I got to fight racism, I was going to do it. So it was kind of like my defining moment that I knew then that racism was real. Now I heard about it, read about it, but when it hits you, you know it. So that was the beginning, I think.
And the fact that you say it still pierces you, you still interesting. When I interviewed Reverend C.T. Vivian, and he was recounting what he went through, and I could see it literally in his eyes, where we're talking and smiling, laughing, all of a sudden his eyes begin to narrow. That here he was at 93, and he still felt it.
Well, it's sort of like some things you don't, some people say when they had surgery, they remembered when they had the incision. You still feel it. I guess the pain of whether it's memory or whatever it is, maybe it's hard to describe, but it stays with you. But I've interviewed people like ball players who said that one guy was hired right after Jackie Robinson, and he said the owner of the team, the manager, would say, listen, guys, we're going out here to play ball and we're going to win. It's not just you, it's the team. The team. Everything he said was the team. This is team spirit, not you, the team. He'd go out, play ball, win, come back. The team came back. Then he would have to go to a segregated area behind the curtain at lunch because he said, you always got to feel like I don't belong. I'm not worthy. Those two phrases, he said, haunted him. You don't belong. You're not worthy. And it looks like, Roland, that as African Americans, we're always trying to prove our worth. And it's happened to me 100 times. I don't have time to tell you all the times. But you hear white people say, you don't belong here. You know better. Well, why don't you belong?
And you hear it today.
Today.
You hear it today. I mean, even when you hear these conversations, when you look at the attacks on NFL players who are protesting and Colin Kaepernick, oh, go back to where you came from. this is where I tell people, Jim Crow had kids and grandkids. Let's not act like all of a sudden the election of a black president, having a black governor in Virginia, Massachusetts, having black CEOs somehow just erased all of that.
That's true. We just seem like that ugly head of racism keeps raising itself. And our political times today are not helping. I think we're in a climate now where it's okay to bring your hatred out. It started with Obama when he was president. I think they just resented the fact that he had made it. And now I think white racism has just said it's okay to do it because of the climate of our country.
Well, one of the things that I've talked about is that we're operating in this period of what I call white minority resistance. Even though they're not in the minority, but they see where we are going. They see that by 2044, no one group will be the majority of the folks in this country. And there's this fear, and that there's this fear of losing power, fear of losing money, fear of losing control. And when you now see reports where 50+% of whites think that there's rampant discrimination against white Americans, which is beyond laughable. When you begin to, when they say, well, millennials, white millennials won't be the same, but when you look at the polling data, they hold some of the same feelings. What we're seeing is that there's a fear of no longer being able to run everything in America the way they desire.
I think that's the prevailing mood. Well, the reality is just no longer just a mood, it's reality. That we have proven a lot of our value, even when it's not acceptable and not accepted. It's proven that we can control, we can do, we can work, we can perform. And I remember getting a letter from a white mother in mid-America who said that she was taught, this was in a relationship to the Trumpet Awards. She had been watching the awards and saying that African Americans had been doing a lot to add to the richness of this great country. And she said it was that typical awakening for her that her mother and father both taught her that all black people were lazy. She said, didn't say some, a lot, all. She said all black men would rather stand in line to get a welfare check than to get a paycheck. That all black women would rather have a baby than have a job. So she grew up hating us. And it wasn't until she just kind of latched onto the viewing of the Trumpet Awards and saw the contributions we were making that her notion now was changing. She said we piqued her interest. And she started going to the libraries, trying to learn more, and found out that her parents had not told her the truth. That she now had two girls. One was 3 and one was 5. And she did not want them to grow up in the same ignorance she did, so sent us the tape for the Trumpet Awards. And that was what she was calling about. That notion is not widespread. I think there are people who still feel that way about African Americans. But the reality is the picture is a lot different from what people perceive us to be. We're doing things now, running and governing and performing and doing well. And it doesn't set well to those who want to believe otherwise.
But the key thing you said there was, this was a woman who was in middle America. We call it flyover country. We saw after the election of Trump, all these people said, oh, we've got, these people are frustrated, they're losing opportunities, and we've got to really understand them. And every time I would hear working class, that's who they would be talking about. And I kept saying on television, wait a minute, hold up. They ain't the only people working. Let's stop acting like they are. And the reality is, in a lot of these places, it's 90, 95, 98% white. They don't know any of us. They don't see us. And so they have these perceptions. They listen to conservative talk radio all day. They watch Fox News all day, which further amplifies that point of view.
Of course.
And then all of a sudden, you get a Trump. And then people begin to say, well, yeah, we got to listen to their fears. And I'm going, if y'all broke, I can show you some folks in the inner city broke. You think you got bad schools? I can show you some bad schools. But in many ways, they're voting against their own interest, and then somehow saying, well, it's our fault.
Well, I think it's always easier to transfer the blame and the critiquing to the other group. It's easier that way because it takes it off from you. I think that really wish Martin Luther King was still here today. His strong teachings of love and understanding, and he used to say all the time, we can live together. We can respect each other. And his notion always was that he didn't think that all white people hated us because they loved to hate. He said so many of them perhaps would not hate us if they knew who we were. And I think that's where we've been derelict in our history and in our schools, not showing the contributions that we've been making. We've been contributing, and yet you've got a segment of the population that you don't belong here.
Before SCLC, you worked with the National Urban League.
Yes.
Talk about that, and also you going undercover?
Yes. Well, what happened is I felt like, I was really doing a lawman's job, but it was really a job of enjoyment, really. Because what had happened in Chicago at the time, and this was, I'm talking like the 50s, they had good business people, companies, and I'll just name a few. It doesn't matter to me. I hope I won't hurt you.
It's all good.
Marshall Field was a big conglomerate. I mean, little girls grew up saying, one of these days I'm going to Marshall Fields and get a pretty dress, Marshall Fields was big, and Spiegel's was a mail order, and Montgomery Ward were mail order giants. And so they were good guys in terms of like contributing with the NAACP dinner. Mm-hmm. They'd buy tickets, but they wouldn't hire people. So the Urban League said, well, let's see if they really are good as they pretend to be. And so what they started was a program to see when the want ads come out, like, did Marshall Fields have some openings? If so, then I would go, and we were always stationed and positioned about 5 minutes away from Marshall Field's office. And we called and said, I see, because back in the 50s, if you could type pretty mm-hmm. good and you could speak English, you could get a job as a clerk typist. That was a good entry-level job.
Right.
So they had some clerk typist positions. So Urban League said, okay, call. I'd call and say, is that job open? Oh, yes, very nicely on the phone. Okay, I'm going to come and apply. Hang the phone up. Less than 5 minutes, I'm there. And then, oh, gee, we just filled it. You filled it in 5 minutes. So I document the responses, right. And that's where we'd go to the major giants and kind of broke up that whole facade of we're good guys, but maybe not as good as we ought to be.
So I want to deal with that, because I keep making the point to people, don't get confused by companies today who buy tables and make nominal contributions.
Right.
And in some cases, our organizations will give them an award for, they bought a couple tables every year. Mm-hmm. When I say, hey, if you spend $5,000 on tables, but then you won't put folks in executive suites, that means that we're losing out on $1, $2, $3, $4, $500,000 jobs, and all we're getting for it is a measly couple of tables. Mm-hmm. And so it's amazing to me how that still happens today. And unfortunately, a lot of us will not demand that. No, wait a minute. If you're locking us out of high-level paying jobs, if our black folks could actually have those jobs, they can buy the tables.
Yeah, that's true. We have in our metropolitan paper here a section every Sunday of people who are moving up the ladder. And they'll tell you who's in the news.
Right.
And they put nice pictures on there. And I've been monitoring this because I think I'm going to do something about it. Because too many Sundays, I've charted Sundays like I have right now, 8 Sundays in a row, mm-hmm. not one black person. The ones who get it were appointed to, let's say, they got a job on a committee. Mm-hmm. But I mean, those real serious jobs that
Power
pay,
jobs.
that pay good
Yes.
and pay well, where I'm not seeing enough presence. Now, maybe they can't put everybody in there, but I'm watching it because, the perception is half of what you get. It becomes a reality to some people. And I don't want to accept that as my reality because I'm too active and I'm too important in my own thinking to let something like that just slide by and pretend like we don't notice it. But I'm noticing it, and that doesn't mean, and I don't want to just knock everybody down right now with that statement, but it doesn't look good for me to read that Sunday after Sunday that the jobs aren't there, the appointments are getting on committees, but that's not a good job.
So what was the point when you decided to join SCLC?
Well, I was married at the time to Ed Clayton, who was the editor of Jet Magazine, and he had a great reputation of getting the job done. He was good at writing and everything. Martin at the time, we were living in Chicago, but Martin was here growing also. They'd moved from Montgomery to Atlanta. And he was feeling the growth, and he said, we need publications, we need public relations, we need somebody to help with speeches. And so he just started asking as he traveled, who's a good person? He said Ed's name came up every place he went. He said, you probably can't get him, but he's pretty pricey, but he's the best. And so finally he said, well, I'm going to call him. Well, Martin called. I had met Martin before this, but he was just, a minister. He wasn't moving in the direction he ended up going. But he called Ed and asked him, would he come down and give a look and see? And he said, but you don't have any money? He said, no, we don't have any money. Oh, you got the wrong guy. He said,
And
so
you probably was saying the same thing, like, we're not working for free.
Right, yeah, right. And so fortunately, my husband made a good salary because Mr. Johnson, who owned Ebony and Jet and so forth, believed in paying decent salaries. He didn't want his people to run to New York Times and looking for better pay. So he paid good pay, good wages, and so we were living pretty comfortably. So he asked Ed to come. And he finally talked him into coming. So he came to Atlanta to see what they're doing. And he came back home and said, they're pretty serious down there. So those guys are committed to trying to make change. And he was impressed to the point that he said he'd give him a month. And so he came down here for a month, and then Martin wouldn't let him go. And in the meantime, Coretta wanted to do concerts to raise money for SCLC. But she couldn't get off the ground, and Ed said, I'll help you do that. And my wife is really good. She'll help you also. So he programmed.
And you're like, so you just volunteered me.
So yeah, I was going to say, now he put me in the mix. And so the story goes now, so I ended up traveling with Coretta, and then Ed was, here. And we stayed on one tour. Our first tour, as a matter of fact, was 11 days and nights. And she said that's enough to convince her that a woman can sleep together, eat together, and get along comfortably for 11 days. It must be okay. So she kind of liked me, and Martin is liking Ed, and they put the pinch to us to move to Atlanta. But I tell people all the time, Martin really wasn't all that truthful because he said, if you'll just move, I'll get you a new house, a car, a housekeeper, a dog. And he promised me everything. He gave me none of it. So I said, Martin Luther King's a shyster, But it was kind of like the best move we've ever made.
Would you, in terms of talking about those concerts, I mean, that is a really, not misunderstood, but just not really well-known aspect in terms of really how the movement was funded. Because people talk about, well, he gave speeches and he gave the money back and lived a very, very modest lifestyle. But those concerts helped pay for the SCLC, helped pay salaries.
Oh, they were very successful. And she, you know, the nation now is beginning to embrace Martin Luther King. He was getting bigger all the time. And so when she would come on the scene, I mean, she's the wife of Martin Luther King. So they didn't get him, but they got her. So the concerts were well attended, well attended. So she was a big hit. And they were feeling like they were touching Martin Luther King. And so it really was a good move for her.
And so the two of you became very close.
Yes.
It had to have been difficult to be. I mean, look, he was young, but she was a young woman.
Yeah.
They get married, and goodness, he's rarely there. I mean, the books that I've read, I tell people all the time, and when you start looking at gone 18, 20, 22, 24, 26 days out of the month, you're seeing your spouse 2, 3, if you're lucky, 4 days in a month.
But let me tell you, without revealing a lot of private information, the King family, old man King, we called him Daddy King, and Mama King, they were pretty strongly entrenched in the city, well-to-do, comfortable leaders and all of that. They had picked a girl for Martin to marry. He was off at Boston, and Coretta had gone to the conservatory, so they were both in Boston at the time. And Martin knew that the girl here was handpicked by the family, and he liked her. It was a very prominent family. And that was the person that they wanted for Martin. And Martin was going in that direction till he met Coretta. And I can tell you this, Roland, today, and looking back, and the other woman's a very fine person, and she ended up, you know, marrying well. But he chose the right person. Coretta was a woman who was wed to the cause. She not only married him, but she married his mission. And so she accepted his absences. She was so organized. Like when we were on the road, she'd call back home to her housekeeping staff and say, you know, Dexter has reading lessons at 2, and Bernice has to go here, and Yolanda has to go there. Be sure they keep their appointments and somebody get them there. She was running the house from afar. Now, Dr. King didn't like for her to travel that much, and she didn't travel as much as she wanted to, but he said one of us has to stay home with these children. So he was very strongly committed to somebody being there. But she didn't stay away long, and she would plan her absences more when she knew he was going to be home. But it worked out very well, but she was committed to that cause. His cause became hers, and she kept it to her end, his end and her end.
You talk about being married to the movement. When I was talking to Merle Evers Williams, she at Dick Gregory's funeral, she said the public really doesn't know this just really unique relationship that existed between her, Coretta Scott King, and Betty Shabazz. And she was just talking, and she was just saying, you know, if folks have no idea, we would get a call and be like, look, I'm sick of this. I'm leaving him. She said, we've been on the phone going, no, you're not. Mm-hmm. Just go ahead, just blow your steam off. And she was just saying how it was just that the three of them shared something that other people had no idea about. And then when you begin to talk about the other folks in the movement, whether it was Andrew Young, whether it was Hosea Williams, whether it was, I mean, you go down the line, the spouses literally were in this thing together. It became their lives.
Exactly.
It wasn't just a job.
And they all wore it so well. You know, I knew them all. And they wore the mantle of leadership in the absence of their husbands so well. And I have nothing but admiration and respect for all of them, because they all had families, you know, 3 and 4 children to the family. And they carried on extraordinarily well.
When you were working there and you're in the middle of this, did you ever say, we really are changing the world? Or was it just, we're just going through it day by day?
Oh no, you knew you were making change. I remember, and you told me how you just interviewed Reverend C.T. Vivian. I remember so well how he was on the steps of the courthouse, he and some other people, pleading to come in just to register to vote, just to register to vote. And he was beaten severely, and the blood, and I see that footage sometimes. I said we ought to play it every election. The blood running down his face, just trying to register. And then we fast forward, and we get a voting rights bill, the right to vote. Now, what bothers me in all of that is that, you know, I still hear people say, it looks like rain. I heard it may rain, so I may not go.
Oh,
And so I just, I'm telling you, I just shiver in my boots. And this year just really blew my whole mind. I had no idea that this year, I thought we were doing better each year when I found out that this election, this last major national election, that we had one of the lowest turnouts we've had in many a moon.
in 20 years. Black turnout.
I couldn't
Lowest
believe it.
lowest in 2 decades.
I couldn't believe it. I don't know how anybody could stay in bed on election day. But I said, if they see the footage of Reverend C.T. Vivian and the people who helped get us to this point now where you can go. So it didn't matter whether it rained or not. You didn't have no place to go, so you didn't have to get up. And now you can't even get up now because you can. It bothers me greatly. People don't vote. But the changes were so apparent. You know, I felt every change. I felt proud of it and a little bit of the ownership of it. Mm-hmm.
Thinking back, just the different touch points, the different on the timeline. Which one of those moments really jumps out at you? Was it a bill? Was it a march? Was it a speech? Was it a death? Was it where you think back and you go, man, I was a part of that?
No, there was not one. I go back to each moment and relive it. While the description of the moment would vary, the pain, the suffering, the pride, the joy, the angst, all of those moods are the same. I remember going to Jackson, Mississippi, just for a convention. And one of my many jobs was to pick up those special guests who were coming in. And I went to the airport, and there was Mrs. Parks, who didn't have anybody to pick her up because, you know, these were chauvinistic days also. So women were second. And I said, oh, Mrs. Parks, I didn't have, you know, any information to pick her up. I didn't know she's on that flight. And I said, listen, I have to pick you up, so you just wait right here. I'm coming to pick somebody else up. So while we were waiting, she said, you know, I didn't bring the right clothing. You know, I get kind of cold in these air-conditioned environments, so you think you could find me a wrap? And I said, oh, of course. I said, there's a store right a block from the hotel where we're staying. And I'll go there and get your wrap. As soon as we get in, I'll go get you something. And sure enough, I did. I went to the store, had money in my pocket, and found a nice wrap I thought would serve a purpose. Saw the lady, the waitress, I mean, not the clerk. She was busy, and I thought she was just busy with the display shelf. And I thought she saw me because I was the only person there, but she didn't stop. And finally I said, Miss, try to get her attention. She looked around, didn't stop. So I said, Miss, I'm ready for my purchase. And she said, you know, you people make me sick. You know you don't belong here. Now we got the Public Accommodations Act, so I did belong there. But she said, you know, you people, and that's another thing that gets you, you people. I said, Miss, I have money to pay for this item, and I'd like to pay for it. Oh, exasperation just took over. Oh, you people just make me sick. Well, I could have dealt with that. You know, I could have argued with her and fought with
Mm-hmm.
her. But I went there to buy something, had the money, paid for it, and walked out. And on the way back, here I hear again, you don't belong here. You know, I found every step of the way I was running into that. And I just said, you know, when the law comes, has it really made a difference? No, because the law doesn't change every person's
Right.
attitude. It just now gives you the right to belong there. So I was in the right place because I belong there. But I haven't changed her heart. And Dr. King said so effectively, until and unless you change a man's heart, you may never change his behavior. So we got to change their hearts in order to change their behavior. So we hadn't gotten to her then. Um, but I knew then that that law was going to make it okay for me to belong there. I may not be treated right, but I belong there.
Was there any point for you where you were scared? This is over for me.
Not really, because I was looking for a home. Mahalia Jackson, who was very famous, gospel singer, well known, wanted to buy another house she owned. She wasn't moving, she just wanted another house. Saw this house, and so she told me in my movements would I look for something for her. Well, I was in California, just the house that I knew she would like, and had a sign out front for sale. And I just went up and rang the doorbell and asked the man the silly question like, is the house for sale? Guess he said, can you read? But it was a kind of an odd everything because, yes, I could read, and it did say for sale, and he said it wasn't sale, he had just sold it, you know. Well, I said, well, why don't you move the sign? Well, now you're going to have an argument, and then you've got a fight on your hands. You keep going every day. It's not over yet, Roland. Even today, we got the laws, and I was there when a lot of them were passed. I've seen them and worked through it and fought through it and helped ownership of some of the legislation. But we haven't changed everybody's heart yet, so I still run into it. And so there's not a moment when
You saw you saw up close the personal toll it took. It was a lot for civil rights leaders to have to carry. How did they deal with just all of that? Laughter, music, camaraderie? Was it, even in those cases, still that private pain when you read books and you hear them talk about Dr. King and depression? I read, just finished reading Nick Cott's book on Judgment Days, and he wrote about him and LBJ, these two iconic figures, and what they personally battled. I've talked to others, and they talked about for many of them, there were lonely moments as well. These are folks who were in their 20s, who were changing the world. That's a lot to bear.
well, but you know, I was very close to Dr. King. I used to hear he just loved President Johnson. They had a nice love affair up to a certain point. But Martin, and I can call him that, you know, I know this is a public program, but I feel a kinship to him because we had a close relationship. But he was a composite of all that. He had some moments that were lonely. Every week on a Tuesday morning, he took time off. He had a location that was secret, and he would go there and just get in his pajamas and stay all day and commune with nature and commiserate about, what he's planning to do, would like to do. But he did it alone. He was there all day. And the only time we would intrude is like he would call and ask me to, say, bring him some lunch. Or he had some papers that had to be signed. We'd take them to him, but didn't bother him on those personal days. He was gathering his thoughts and just communing. And yet, I saw a different kind of lonely, and that he was alone. He wasn't lonely. He was alone on those prescribed dates. But I saw him near the end of his life. He died a very depressed man because he had made that speech about Vietnam.
April 4th, 1967,
Yes,
Riverside
exactly,
Church, Beyond
exactly.
Vietnam.
And it seemed like his world shut down. People stopped giving. Even his friends who you could count on for money just dried up.
Black folks.
Oh, yes.
Approval numbers
he
low.
He said, I think he couldn't get a handle on it. He just said, I can understand your enemies not supporting you. They don't believe in you anyway. But your friends? He said, I thought everybody who knew me knew that I couldn't cope with war. There is no victory in war, he used to say. And when he saw those children on the TV in Vietnam, he said, now I've got to speak. Children being bombed with that napalm stuff. He said, I've got to do something. And he then spoke out and lost everybody. And it really, really bothered him to the very end. And if you remember reading, on his last birthday, he was here in Atlanta, and they were having a meeting over at Ebenezer Church planning a strategy for the next movement. And there was a film crew here to just follow him, doing a documentary on him for Italy television. And they called me, they meaning Andy Young and Reverend Abinez and all of them called and said, we haven't seen him laugh for a long time. And we've just decided you're the only person who we think can make him laugh. So will you come over to the church at a certain time? And let's just have today was his birthday. And I said, I need a little more time. Anyway, not making the story too long, I agreed to go. Mm-hmm. When the meeting broke, he started out to the men's room and said, hey, Doc, come back. Now, the television crew is getting all of this, because they're following his movements. So he sat down, and I said, listen, this is your birthday. And so I pulled out of a little sack I had, a little tin cup. It was gold, but it was the beggar's cup, people used to call it. And I said to him, you're always trying to help President Johnson with the war on poverty. So I want you to take this cup and go stand on the corner wherever you travel and get some money for President Johnson. And he just smiled. He laughs. He laughs. And I said, and also, you go to jail so much, I'm going to give you these potato chips. So the next time you go, you'll have something to snack on, and he falls out laughing. Well, Roland, when they got ready to do a movie on him after his death, they couldn't find any footage of him laughing. And so this footage became the most valuable footage. It is now still used. They use it. I was on the prize and use it now for lots of things. But it was the first time he had laughter on his countenance for months. He died of a broken heart because he could not understand how people couldn't support his view on Vietnam, killing people. Now, I tell you that story because the man was mixed with, he was such a humorist. I mean, in private, there's nobody funnier. I even said to him one time, I said, you don't have to worry about the future and a job. When you solve all the problems of the world, you can go on stage by being a comedian. He was the funniest man ever. Everybody agreed to that, those who were privileged to be in private moments with him. He'd tell a joke and get an inflection, just like the one story he's telling. And he was very, very, very funny. Filled with humor, loved to play. He'd come home from a trip, and he and his children, the first thing he wanted to do was play with the kids. And they had an awful game that Mrs. King just couldn't stand. And the game was they'd pull up a chair, the little ladder, climb on top of the refrigerator. And then the game goes, Martin's on the floor, and they're leaping into his arms. Now, that's real faith that your dad's going to catch you. And they had a kiss spot. You know, with 4 children, everybody had a spot. And he would catch the kid and then kiss him, and always he'd kiss the wrong spot. Daddy, no, Daddy, that's the wrong spot. Oh, and then they'd have a fight over the wrong spot. And they would just fill the kitchen with laughter. Mrs. King didn't like her. She figured going to kill themselves. But I saw in that picture faith in their father, faith that they could leap down and he would catch them. Having the father in the house, playing the game, getting the kiss spots, that was more pleasure for him than it was for them. It was pleasure for all. So to see him in the years that he lived, filled with the laughter, and then see him go out of the world with the sadness bothers me.
You mentioned that last year. Again, I've watched numerous documentaries, read numerous books. And I tell people, I don't care what anyone tells me, there is no coincidence that he dies on April 4th, 1968. A year to the day.
That was something.
After giving that speech. He was troubled for a few years over Vietnam. Diane Nash, James Bevel, and others were pushing him on it. Did he ever talk with you, or when you listen to the debates back and forth, as he struggled with that issue? Because he had to have known the moment he took that stance, he's opposing LBJ. He's opposing, he's laying it all on the line once he says, enough is enough with this war.
Well, I had a chance to be around him, kind of know his thinking. And so I'll go out on the limb by saying I think he did, because he reached points in his life where, well, whatever I lose, I lose. I've got to take the stand. He was willing to take the stand that he felt was the right position on an issue, regardless. It didn't matter to him what the consequences were at the time he's going to take the stand. So I knew that he probably knew that there was going to be a price to pay. I don't think he knew the extent the price was. I don't think he knew that everybody's going to turn against him.
And he takes this stance, and his wife has no choice but to go along with it, and his decision has a direct impact on her and their children.
Oh, yeah.
Because he put it all on the line.
Well, but he told her, and see, I drove him to the airport to go to Memphis, but he said to me that he felt like the country was at a point now where it was not ready for change. That all the change we've made is about all we're going to get. And so when he comes back from Memphis, he said, when I come back from this trip, Coretta and I are going to take a year off to go to India again. We got to retool. That wasn't his language. But he said, we've got to start again. Now, what was the problem with that is that SCLC was already in the planning stages for the
Poor People's Campaign.
Poor People's Campaign.
His idea.
Mm-hmm. But he told me he wasn't going to go. He was going to abandon the idea. He was leaving when he came back. He was going to India. Now, there are those who differ. I don't say that a lot. As a matter of fact, I'm taking a stand now to tell you this on television, because I didn't express that to everybody because I saw it wasn't well received. But that's the truth. And so I'm telling you now the truth. The planners of the march didn't want to hear it because there was, you got to have some movement after he's no longer here. You got to have some action-filled programmatic thrust. Otherwise, you're going to die. So that was a bold statement, but he told it to me. Now, I have no way of knowing whether he really meant it. I believe he meant it because he didn't joke a lot about his plans. I think he meant it. He said, the country now is not right for what we're doing, and I've got to make a switch.
You dropped him off at the airport, and he gets out. As you think back, have you, I'm sure you have you just went back and just played every part of that? What he had on, what he said, last look, all of those things. Because that was the last time you saw him alive.
Yeah. But let me tell you what happened. The day before, I was at their home. Mrs. King was convalescing from recent illness, and she was there. Mother-in-law, well, Martin's mother was there, Martin and I. After dinner, we were playing the piano. He's a great singer, and I played the piano. He said, I bet you didn't know I could sing. I said, well, I heard you could. No, I didn't know you could. He said, well, I know you can play. So sit down at the piano.
You majored in music in college.
Yeah, yeah. So we had such fun. We were singing and, just having a great time. When we separated, the evening ended, I went home and told him I'd pick him up the next morning, whatever time established. But Mama King called me that night about 11:30, and she said, I know you're taking ML to the airport tomorrow, but tell him something for me. Said, just like that fun we had today, I'd like to have more days like that. I know I'm the mother and I have to understand he's busy, but you see to it and tell him I want him to plan more fun time for family hour. Will you do that for me? I said, of course. Well, I told him, I said, now your mother called me and I told her she wants more of your time and we're going to see that you do that. Well, guess what? About 3 or 4 o'clock Atlanta time, because Memphis was an hour behind us, he called her. Talked to her about an hour and a half. She said it never happened before. Could you take your mother for granted? He knew she was going to be there. She was supportive of her. The son loved him dearly. But he didn't bother to call her. But when I saw her that first time that night, because I went over to check on them, she said, listen, when this pain subsides a little bit, I'm going to tell you how much I appreciate what you did. Because he told me you told him what I said, and that prompted him to call, and they had a big laugh about, here's the call. And he knew, I think, because he called his brother. He'd never done that before. Called him on the phone, I understand, talked a good time with him. He did a lot of odd things. I talked to him, and he said to me, why does my room number sound so familiar to you? I mean, to me, he said. And I said, I don't know, because I don't know what room you're in, because we'd switched hotels. And he said, it's 306. And I said, well, that's my house number. And I said, you've been here enough, so I guess you make it the relation. That all of these things were odd things that happened that day.
April 4th.
Uh-huh. It was early in the day. He called me. And then it called his mother, called his brother, and Andy said they were playing pillow throwing, whatever.
After he came back from court,
yeah,
came in
and they
had
played
a pillow fight.
Yeah. And so he did a lot of things that day that were unusual, I understand. I wasn't there, I was here. But he did a lot of unusual things, Oh, I tell you something else that was most unusual. Coretta's favorite gift is red roses. And every birthday, her birthday's in April. April 27th is her birthday. Now he left on, it was March, I guess, when he left Atlanta. Mm-hmm. He bought her some artificial flowers and left them in the library of the house. And he told her to go get the flowers. And no, he told the housekeeper to tell her when he leaves, go get those flowers out of the library. She was angry. He said, "Did you get those roses?" So she said, "Yes, but I'm mad about it." She said, "Why?" He said, "Because they're artificial." And guess what he said to her? "I didn't know whether I would be here on your birthday or not, but I wanted your roses to be here." Now, he died. That was April 4th. Well, that was April 3rd when he talked to her. Her birthday is April 27th. He said, "I don't know whether I will be there in person for your birthday, so, but here are your red roses." You know, she kept those roses a long time.
6:01 p.m., April 4th. Shots ring out. How do you find out?
I was having dinner with the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. And the maitre d' knew my relationship with the Kings, and she came over to the table and gave me a note. Well, we were talking. I was busy talking, and she said, "Did you hear about Dr. King?" I just folded up the note and kept talking. She thought that was odd. She came back a second and she said, "I hate to interrupt your meal." She said, "But I just heard on the radio he'd been shot." Well, that didn't bother me either because I'd been in his presence before when it was reported. We were in Los Angeles once. They reported that he had been shot. And we were in there getting ready for a nice, comfortable evening and a meal. Well, not just he and I, but several of us were. Again, we had a big laugh about it. That they said, "I think the guy had 8 sticks of dynamite," and said, "I think I got him." We saw it on TV. So I didn't think anything about it. I just talked to him
I thought it was
earlier
a
that
hoax.
day, and so he was all right then. And I said, "Well, maybe I better go to the phone." I went to the telephone, and their private lines were busy, and that's unusual for all the lines to be busy. And I said to my guest, "I think I'd better go over there." So I then drove over. And as I was getting to her driveway, she was backing out. The mayor was there and the police. They were taking her to the airport. And she said, "Oh, I've been trying." She left the window down. It was raining. She said, "I've been trying to reach you. I've got to go to Memphis." Said, and she had a housekeeping staff, but she knew I had a special relationship with the children. She said, "Will you check on the children for me? I don't know what's going to happen." Because see, when they called her, they didn't they didn't tell her he was killed. They told her he'd been shot and injured.
So when you're driving up, you still think it's not true?
Well, I think something must have happened.
Right. Once
I knew
but as you're
something
driving
happened.
over, you're going, "Okay, we've heard this before. Let me drive over."
Yeah, right.
But then
Yeah.
when you turn that corner and then you see
Yeah.
police and the mayor, that's when it hits you.
There's something.
Okay, something happened.
Something did happen.
And so you pull up, she rolls the window down, but she doesn't know that he's gone.
That's right. She didn't know it. And it wasn't until she got to the airport that she got the call and I think the mayor got the call that he is gone. And so Martin's secretary was there at the airport to join her. And they went to the ladies' room, and that's when she got the real official word. And then she came back home.
So you're in the house with the children.
And I stayed. I didn't leave there until 5 days later, 6 days later.
You know he's gone. Did you wait for her to return to tell them, or they made aware, the children?
Oh, I would never, not even consider telling the children. She came shortly, I guess, after, well, I guess they could speed, but she came, it didn't take her long to get to the house, and she came in telling her staff and everybody. And by now, the house is filling up because everybody else now has heard. But she said to her staff, "Do not tell my children. I'll do that myself." And so her bedroom was at the end of the long hall in the house. So she decided to make that her solace. And then people up front would answer the phone and then direct the call back to see if she would take, and I'd be the interceptor. I just stayed with her. But she got ready to go tell the boys, and she asked me to go with her. and she had a death grip on my arm, I mean, tightly, trying to tell the children. She told Dexter first, the younger boy, that, you know, your dad has been seriously hurt. She couldn't bring herself to, she couldn't bring herself. She said, your dad has been hurt. Well, how bad is he hurt? She said, pretty badly, I understand. Um, but we'll talk about it later, but, you know, he's not coming home. And I've got a lot of things to do. And he finally, he said, well, if he's hurt bad, and he jumped out of his bed. He said, if he's hurt badly, why are you still here? You all do everything together. Why are you still here? And he was chastising her. And she said, oh, well, you know, got a lot of decisions to make. And she was calmly, still holding me so tightly. And then we went to the other side of the room, which was the other boy's side, Martin. And she told him, he was older, so she said, it's pretty serious. And so we got a lot of decisions to make. I don't know what we're going to do first, but it looks like he's very, very serious.
She still can't say.
She couldn't say it. She couldn't say it. And he said, well, what must I tell my children, I mean, my friends at school tomorrow? So she said, well, you know, you're not going to go to school, so you won't have to worry about that. And he leaped up. What do you mean? I have to go to school. Miss Davis said there'll be no cutting her classes. And I laughed later, not at that moment, but I said, that teacher put cut these classes. But she finally got out of the room, and then she had a sigh of relief, you know, that she finally had told them. Now, Bernice was too little. She was only like 4, I think, and didn't understand. But Yolanda came in, and she sat on her mother's bed right beside her, and they embraced, crying, like, we're big girls. We're not going to cry. Daddy wouldn't want us to cry, so we're not going to cry, Mommy. We're going to pull this thing together. The two of us can do this. And they are wailing. The most poignant moment. That was a difficult moment for me, and I guess I was crying too, because they were just embracing tightly, saying, we're not going to cry. We're not going to cry. But what, so they finally said, okay, we're gonna work this thing out. As the calls were coming in, assumed Mrs. King would want to talk to the president. And so, you know his voice, so I would take the call and said, okay, Mrs. King, this is President Johnson. But what was interesting, everybody had the same message. And it's the same one maybe you and I make, like someone dies, you said, if I can do anything, let me know. And meeting it, you know, anything you need me to do, let me know. If there's anything I can do. Mm-hmm. Everybody had the same message except one call. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy. His call was the one that was different. He said, Mrs. King, it's obvious now. When he called, it was, now see, in Atlanta it was about 5 or 6-ish, and people started calling. And so up until now, it's almost 10. Mr. Kennedy said, it's obvious, Mrs. King, that you need more telephone lines, because I've been trying to get you ever since the news broke. But Mr., and I'll make up a name because I don't remember the name, but Mr. John Jones is en route to Atlanta now to install 9 telephone lines for you. He'll be there at 12:30 tonight. He's en route now. I also heard on the TV that you'd perhaps want to go pick your husband up in Memphis. So we've dispatched a plane. It's already there in Atlanta. The pilot's name is Sam Smith. Tailgate number 12345, telephone number 822. So whenever you want to go, all you have to do is make this call. He will take you, and he's in readiness whenever you want to go to Memphis. Also, who's your point person? She told I was going to be her lead spokesperson. And he said, Xernona called every hotel in the city of Atlanta, talked to the management, and put a clamp on all the rooms in the hotel, in the city, that people will be coming to this funeral who were heads of states, and we got to be sure we have right allocation of space. And my team will be there tomorrow morning, and we're going to set up an office at 123 Maple Street, and we will help govern things. He just jump, lay everything out. And we followed his rules.
Because he had been through it.
Mm-hmm. He said, we know how, we've got experience in this. We know what we're doing. And he was right. And I was there when Jacqueline Kennedy came, which was the expected moment. Two things happened. I don't know, you got time for me to tell all
Yeah.
this? Before I tell you about Mrs. Kennedy, I'm going to tell you about Nixon. He wasn't president at that point. He was the
Republican candidate.
Yeah, the candidate for Republican. He called our newspaper publisher and said, I know Dr. King's feelings on me, but do you think you could help arrange for me to come visit Mrs. King? My wife and I want to come make a call on her. And he said, no, I can't do it, but I've got a very good friend who's at her house, and he was talking about me. And she will tell me whether you can or not, so let me get in touch with her, and then I'll call you back. So he called me, and I said, I don't know, I have to run it by her. Well, when I told her that, in the house there were people who said, oh, no, Dr. King wouldn't want to see him. And so they talked to her, saying, no, why don't you say no? Well, I had her last ear, so I said, Mrs. King, this is not a time for politics. Why don't you let him come? But let's lay some ground rules. Mm-hmm. No entourages, no press, no nothing. Just come. If he's making a personal call, then he personally can call on her. So she bought my advice and agreed. Called Mr. McGill and told him and said we wanted him to come unannounced. And sure enough, he came. But guess what happened? He came up, and we knew what time. They told us all the way. He's at the airport now. He's on his way. So we knew when to expect him. And when he came here, I went to the door, the front of the house. He came in a beige, I don't know cars, but like also a Chevrolet, something like that. It wasn't a fancy, I don't want to offend anybody, but it was a small car. And I ushered him in. Well, he was by himself, but he said, Mrs. Nixon was coming, but he said that they got a call that one of the girls got sick and she had to rush to New York. He said, so he sat by her bed, that's where she received her gift. She said, on her bed, we had a chair, and he sat there face to face and told him he knew how Dr. King felt. He said, but this is not a political call. My wife and I were coming, and he went on to tell why she knew. He said, I have brought with me a check, a personal check, that we are feeling the grief, and because we are Americans, we have to take some responsibility for this. So as our personal expression of sympathy, we want to educate all 4 of your children. And this check that we have here will cover their expenses wherever they go. There's enough money to educate all 4 children. Nobody knows that story because I haven't told it but a few times. Then we were told that Mrs. Kennedy was coming, and then the day she was due, she said she couldn't make it. Then we got another call. She said now she does want to come. She said, I don't have the strength to make it.
Because she had to release, she knew the pain of Coretta Scott King.
You're getting my script ahead of me, because what happened is she finally came. And as I said, describing, you can get the picture of the house. The front door was up there. Coretta's bedroom was at the end of the hall. When she came, they told me she was here, so I went to greet her to bring her back. Roland, those 2 women didn't say one word to each other, verbal word, no word. Neither said hello. They didn't say anything. They embraced. That seemed like 20 minutes. Of course, it wasn't that long. But they embraced without a spoken word for an endless period of time. But you don't have to be smart to read their lips and their heart. The heart was saying, we know what you're feeling. You know, I know, we know. That was the most poignant moment, and it was the one time that I cried because I was feeling their language.
It has to be hard for you because here you are. You go to the home. You're with the kids. She comes back. She asks you to be with her when she tells the children. You have to be her rock.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't grieve. You can't break down. You can't. You're taking the phone calls. You're doing. So how are you? Did you just sort of just go like Robert Kennedy? You just went right into work mode?
Oh, yeah. Because I'm not even sure that I ever cried, come to think of it. I'm saying later, but I never got a chance to grieve. Because one of the things when she was trying to decide whether she's going to go to Memphis, and then right away I said, oh, gee, she needs clothes, because I wanted her to look nice. She's going to be photographed wherever she goes. So the next morning now we were up, well, the night went into morning. So by morning time, I told her I was going to go down and get some clothes. And I did. I went to a nice little shop downtown Atlanta that had nice clothing. And I told the man that I've come to pick some things for Mrs. King. I have no money. I wouldn't dare take time to ask her for a credit card, and I don't have any money, so will you trust me to pick what I think she wants, take it home, and if she likes them, we'll keep them, and I'll come back and pay. If not, I'll bring the clothing back. And he agreed to those terms. Well, I picked out a lot of stuff. Came home. As I was getting into the house, I had a man there who helped me because I had all these clothing. In the lobby, in the foyer of their home, were Belafonte and Stan Levinson. And Stan Levinson was the Jewish friend who'd been with him a long time.
Very close advisor, Dr. King.
Exactly. And said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I wanted to look nice, so I bought a lot of clothes. And I told them the story. I didn't have no money. And they said, well, we wanted to look nice, too, and we know you know what she would look good in. They both gave me a credit card. Said, here, we don't care what you buy. Buy what you think you want for her. Here are the cards to pay for them. So when I came home and when I saw her later on, after the people subsided, she looked at my stuff and liked everything I brought. And I said, oh, I can go back empty-handed. So I said, and I told her the story. I had money. Because she said, she'd give me her credit card. I said, oh, no, I got 2 credit cards. I went back, and guess what? The owner of the store said, you got a balance here? I thought he'd lost his mind. I'm the same one who just left you with all your clothes. And he said to me, I've come to pay for them. He said, listen, I'm a white man in America. And I have to take some of the responsibility of having the climate that created this. So the least I can do is cover the cost of the clothing. You have a zero balance. And I had also designed her headdress. And I had gone down to our department store, which was Macy's at the time. And we had a laugh because they asked me what time was I coming. And I said, well, I don't know. I was so busy. I don't have a schedule. I don't know. He said, well, it doesn't matter. We'll stay here till you get here. The store closes at 5. So if you're not here, I said, can you find the back door? And I laughed. I said, I'm black. I know where all back doors are. So he said, you leave the back door open. I can come through the back door. Sure, if that's what, because the store was closed, I went through the back door and told the lady, this is what I think I want. I had never designed anything either, so I said, this is what I think I want. And so the lady agreed to do it up. And I said, and don't stitch it, just kind of baste it. So, she's got to approve it, and she may not like it. And it was the time except for when the daughter came in and I saw her cry. She never shed a tear. That woman was just strong, making decisions and moving, never cried out after that. But when she tried on the headdress, then she looked in the mirror. And I'm sure she's saying, now, this is what I'm wearing to my husband's funeral. And she broke down that time. But those were the only times she cried the whole time, in that whole long week. It was a week long. That was the week that was. I'll just call it that.
They say rose in a fisted glove.
Mm-hmm.
When you went to the airport, you accompanied her to the airport when his body was returned from?
No. I didn't see the body until, let me tell you that story, because the day he was ready for viewing, because I've been doing a myriad of things, while they had announced that there was going to be a public viewing at 11 o'clock, at that moment we were at the church. Coretta had to make some final revisions to the program. And so she went over to the church, and the security guard called her over there to say, Miss King, what must we do? Said there are thousands of people lined up here to see the body. And so what must we do? And she said, oh, and it had begun a misting rain, and the worst kind of rain is a mist, it's just falling on you. She was such a kind, considerate, compassionate woman. She said, oh, well, let him go on in. And I said, no, Coretta, you should see him first. And I said, the public will wait, but you need to see him first. And what good advice that was, because once we finished the church, we went over to view. And Harry Belafonte and his wife and I were the only non-family members. Everybody else, it's a large family. And I saw them when they came in. I stepped aside, and Coretta came down, and she had a faint response, like she was going to collapse. When I walked up to the bier, he looked awful. It looked as if someone had gone and just dug up a big glob of clay and slapped it upside his face. I was horrified. So I stepped over quietly to the mortician and said, sir, is there anything you can do to the side of his face? He crashly said, miss, his jaw was blown off. That's the best I could do. I was shocked.
Loudly in the
Loudly.
presence
Coretta
of
and
the
all
family?
of them could hear. Oh, I was so angry with him. And I finally said, forget him. And I said, something has to be done, because he looked horrible. I mean, this big old glob of stuff. And so Coretta and I, they're sitting down. Oh, and I looked at Mama King, that's the mother, who's dark-skinned. And then I saw Belafonte's wife, who was white. And back in those years, women always carried loose powder. And I was hoping that they had some. And I said, Mama King, you got any powder? She said, oh, yeah. She gave me her powder, which was dark. Julie, do you have some? And she said, yes. Hers was white. So I took the two and stood over the casket, looking at Martin's face and making myself a little roux of a mixture. Belafonte came over, took his handkerchief, and put it around Martin's neck. And so I'm dabbing to see what I've got here, trying to match the other side of his face to get a balance to it. And I finally got it. And Coretta smiled. And so I'm brushing the excess off of Martin's face. And Belafonte and I never knew what happened to the handkerchief. It was his handkerchief he had taken out of his pocket. And the excess, we folded it up. But he was to stay there till midnight, and then we were moving him to the church for another viewing at 3 a.m. And so I did it again because the body oxidizes with air. And so I went and did it again. So I did it 3 times before the actual funeral.
How did you maintain that level of composure in those days after?
Well, I saw a need and I filled it. And I hear people describing me today. I think that's the way I am. You know, um, I didn't feel anything except I was glad I thought of that. I don't, I didn't have any experience, so I don't know why I did it. I can't give you all those answers like what made me do it. I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of. I knew I needed to do something. I couldn't have this. Martin is somebody we loved and we wanted him to look good. And incidentally, morticians from around the country, the National Association called me. The president of the National, Bob Miller from Chicago, very famous, said to me, "We are ready to come to Atlanta. All of us, if need be. We want him to look good. We want to come and process him. Can you get permission for us to come in?" And of course, I couldn't get permission because Daddy King was very loyal. This mortician had been a member of the church, and he didn't want him to deny him that opportunity. And I was sorry because the people who had real experience would have done a better job even than what I did. Mine was a makeshift stuff. They would have done him better from the beginning, you know. And I remember that. But I didn't give it any thought. I didn't know what I was doing. There was no prerequisite for this. There was no book that tells you to do that, no recipe. I just did it, and it worked.
Were you with her when Lerone Bennett came in and said, "Mrs. King, they're not going to let Ebony and Jet into the pool photography area to shoot the funeral"? And according to him, she said, "Send word. If Ebony is not allowed, no one will be allowed."
That's right. Yes, I was.
When you describe that, just because now we know without that, Monetta Sleet does not shoot that photo
That's right.
and does not become the first African American to ever win a Pulitzer Prize.
That's right. Well, but you know what? It was not unusual. I've been with Coretta in so many circumstances. That was just Coretta. That didn't even seem like it was a difficult decision. You know, we who are black believed in Johnson Publishing, Ebony and Jet, all that it represented. So I had something similar, with the trumpet wars. They're going to monitor the press. The black press couldn't come in. Oh, just no way could that happen. You just knew that would not happen. So it was easy for her to say, no way. Oh, yeah, they're coming in here. And so, but to know her, that was not atypical either. She would just make sure, and her senses were always sharp, always sharp. That funeral did not dull her senses. She knew everything that was going on. She described for you everybody was there. She could tell you everybody that came to that house. She could tell you everything. She was an unusual woman.
Being on the LCLC staff, he's assassinated, he's buried. Here was the guy who, and obviously not by himself, kept it together. You had Andy Young, executive director. You had Ralph Abernathy. But what did you observe? What was it like as you're all trying to move forward, and he's gone, and they're still trying to do Poor People's Campaign, and there are riots across the country, and Black America is in this just collective pain.
Well, I have to be honest with you. I cannot tell you what I thought and what I said. It would be crassless of me to do that, so I won't say. But those of us who were supporters and involved members of the community and those who cared about our future knew we were going to have some difficult days now without him. Because one of the things I even tell young people today, that Martin Luther King didn't do anything without a plan. Nothing. He had 5 men who he considered his battery of advisors. And he'd call them in to say,
Who are those 5?
Oh, I don't want to.
Okay. I read enough to know 4 of them.
But here's the thing. It's written someplace, so
Yeah.
I guess I could, but I don't want to. He would call them in. And these were people who didn't tell him what he liked to hear. What do you think? They'll say, this is what I think. And if you disagree with him, that just so be it. But that's why he picked them, because they would tell him what they thought he ought to do. And that's what he appreciated about them. But he would tell them at the end of every meeting, gentlemen, appreciate your time. But I'm going to mull over everything you've said, call all the thoughts. Then I will make a decision. May not be what you recommended, but I will make a decision. And I will stand by my decision, good, bad, or indifferent. That's what Martin was. If it failed, say, well, I made the wrong decision. But that man let you know all the time, I'm going to lead with a plan, and I got to pray about it, think about it, and then act on it. And so throughout his career, so when now I've got to put into context what he said to me at going to the airport. I'm not going. I don't feel that the country, because he felt that that Memphis thing was set up. He'd never had violence on the march.
Right.
So he said, this timing is not right. So knowing how he viewed the plan before the action, I knew then he thought about this, probably prayed that night over it. I don't know what he did and what all he went through, but when he tells you something, you can put your bottom dollar on it, because you can bet that Dr. King is making the right decision. The only thing that we can say he tripped up on is he misjudged Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
But he was advised not to go to Chicago, and he didn't follow the advice.
Yeah, but the Chicago Negro was very particular.
Yeah, right. So he went there, and Daley said, this is my town. You're not coming in here. And people had told him, my husband told him, he said, no, that's down here. He ain't going to let nothing, you're not going to tear up Chicago. And so he realized now, and I think I've seen where he laughs about that Chicago was tough. It was tougher than Alabama and Mississippi and every place else.
Well, he actually was quoted as saying, and the reason I quoted because when I moved to Chicago to run the Chicago Defender, even though this was 2004, he goes to Chicago in 1966. Negroes were the same way. I'm using Negroes for a reason. Mm-hmm. They were the exact same way. Because I got an extremely negative reaction coming. Mm-hmm. Then again, I also was a little bit more crazier when I said, well, clearly y'all know what the hell y'all was doing. That's why I'm here. Mm-hmm. And because that was a quote where he said, if we could change the Chicago Negro, he said, we could change every Negro in America if we could change the Chicago Negro.
And he would laugh. Some of his best laughter was over them Negroes in Chicago. So, so he didn't do. That was the only time when he really kind of messed up his movement there. But everything else, Martin Luther King thought and prayed and thought and prayed, and then he acted.
A couple more things for you. Becoming the first African American in the South with a primetime show. How'd that happen?
I didn't ask for it. I was thrust upon it. Martin used to talk about all the time how he really appreciated the press. He said, when we talk about children trying to swim in the public pool and they throw lye in there to prevent it, or some dogs nipping at your rear ends, that means that them people are serious. And he said, the press dramatized it. You weren't, this is not stories you make up. When the press moves in on them, they dramatize it and make it a fact that you got to believe. And so he used to say, you know, I believe in the press and the press, and he used to tell all the time, and they asked him to appear for the press club to tell them how wonderful they were. So he said, you know, they really help us a lot. I said, Martin, I don't happen to agree that the press is all that great. And my good friend was Ralph McGill, who was the publisher of the Atlanta Constitution. And Mr. McGill played funny games like this. He would accept an engagement, and then he'd back out and said, oh, I'm sorry, at the last minute I can't come, but I'll send my representative, and I'd be the representative. He said he liked the way I handled race relations, that he said I would teach a lesson without preaching a sermon, which I thought was a great compliment to me. You teach a lesson without preaching a sermon. So now this particular engagement Mr. McGill had was before religious press people. And so he sent me, I was the substitute. And I said, well, you know, Dr. King really praises members of the press. I mean, he loves the media. I don't happen to agree with him on this issue. And I said, and the reason I don't is, I said, I can't find any sensibility in this picture. Television station gets a word that they're denying some black kids or whatever the problem is over here. Got a shutout going on. They can't move here, they can't swim there. So now the white assignment editor gives the story to a white reporter who carries his white cameraman with him, and they go to the scene of the shutout. They get the footage and bring it back to a lily white processor, who gives it to a lily white writer, who gives it to a lily white editor, who gives it now to a lily white anchor. And they come on and said, oh, isn't this awful? And I said, I don't see the difference. It's shut out over here, it's shut out over there. And that was my speech. Well, Mr. McGill called me and said, what in the world did you say today? He said, the television stations are calling me and said, you embarrassed them today. And one station called me, and it was the CBS affiliate, and said, boy, you turned it on us today. But we'd like to take you to lunch. And I'll call Mr. McGill, listen, if I'm not back by 1:30, put out APB on it, because they're taking me somewhere, I don't know where. But guess what? They said they had not thought of that, the way I dramatized that picture. They felt guilty. And they said, now we want to do something about it, and we need your help. And so I got in to help them, like, find somebody. But they decided that I was the one they wanted because I had already credibility and so forth, and they just said, we want you to help change the look of our station. So they threw me on TV. I didn't ask for it, but it gave them a lot of bragging rights, and then the white community embraced me immediately, and that made me an instant success. And so with success, you just move. And I was just reading an article, ran into an article where they were going to take me national after, 8 months because they said I was just a natural. I didn't use cue cards and stuff. You know, me, all you have to do is ask me, how are you? And I just talk. It was a talk show, so I just talk. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about the Trumpet Awards, which is my last question. But I got to go back. How are you having dinner with the head of the KKK?
I'm listed in the books now as the one who caused him to get out. He changed his own stripes, denounced the organization, and withdrew. And he was the Grand Dragon, which is the highest order, highest officer. But I met...
What, did he call you?
Well, let me tell you, we met because we meaning Atlanta, had one of those model cities programs, years ago, where you take 5 diverse communities and see if you can get them all to figure out how to live together or how they live separately, what the living patterns ought to be. And so one of these communities was a white, kind of half-poor community, but all white. And Mr. Craig lived in that community. And so then they formed interracial, integrated, meaning all these 5 communities had representatives on a kind of a board. And then he the mayor, wanted me to run the board. And he said, but I got to tell you something, there's a Ku Kluxer who's a member of that board. And I said, well, I don't know what they look like anyway, so it won't. They don't have white sheets on. I don't know what a Klansman looks like. Well, I was already on television, so people knew me. And so they'd come up and shake hands. Well, Miss Clayton, glad to meet you, glad to have you part of this operation. And I said, and this one man came and gave me some fingertips instead of a handshake. Oh, that is he, I'm sure. You know? But every day he came to my office and we talk about crazy stuff. Well, without acting crazy with him, I just said, oh, Mr. Craig, how do you get such warped thinking? Then I found out he was a deacon in his church, and I found out he was chairman of the deacon board. And I said,
The Grand Dragon of the KKK.
Yeah. And a Baptist church, I said, well, listen, I'm a Baptist. What book do you all read? Mine doesn't say feed the hungry and clothe the naked only if they look like you. It doesn't say that in my book. What does your book say? Well, I kept on every day. We would talk. I didn't know he was going home telling his family, you know, that Miss Clayton's a nice person. But people tell me he said he did, but I don't have time to tell you. But I'll just knock it down. Oh, Mr. Gray. But I said, let me ask you this. Now, in my church, the pastor is the head man, but that deacon is second to the pastor, and you chairman of the board. How can you stand before that congregation with bigotry in your heart, knowing you're filled with it, and now you got to stand before them representing God? How could you do it? And I said, you got children. Every Friday, he would tell me what he's doing on the weekend. Get up the kids, put the robes on, they go out to do harm to people. How could you do that as a Christian? Well, that's the way I would talk to him all the time. I was the most surprised person in the world when one Saturday I went out shopping, came home. On my street, I had all these cars, police, the television stations had cars in front. What in the world? You know, since I live in the hood, I thought I'd been burglarized. You know? And what happened is Mr. Craig had a press conference. He announced he was getting out, denouncing the organization, and he was getting out. And credited a black woman with changing his negative attitudes, and I was that black woman. And then that was the story. Just went all over them. And we got tons and tons of mail. We were invited to London, to everywhere, to appear on television to talk about this experience, you know. But he says that I helped to change all of his thinking.
Vernon Jarrett said he was, last question. Vernon Jarrett said when he saw some young men on the basketball court in Chicago, there was no basketball goal, lights were off, but they literally were running plays as if they were playing basketball. He said if black kids can have that kind of imagination, he said we got to be able to take advantage of that. That led him to create NAACP AXO competition. What led you to say we got to have the Trumpet Awards?
I was tired of seeing us on television acting like buffoons all the time. Never people would stand up and speak English. And I kept hearing in my ear and in my head ringing that Dr. King said he didn't think that all white people hated us, that if they knew us, you know, things would be different. And I said, you know what? They really don't know us. They don't know Charles Drew, a man who died because he couldn't get some of the blood he was saving for other folk. And so I said, here I am working at that time with the CNN operation. I had television at my disposal and a man who was sympathetic to the issues of the day. And I said, I think I can do something to help change these negative attitudes. So I went to Ted, after I drew up my plan, went to him and asked him, could I do it? And he liked the idea, and it became a reality. And I did reap some of the predictions that Martin had talked about, that we got letters from white America who said now, we've changed their attitudes and now they see what we were talking about, and yes, we have contributed. So that's what got me to do it.
20, 30, 40 years from now, it's going to be a child in Atlanta, a child in Chicago, LA, somewhere. They'll be doing a paper, they'll be doing some research, they might come across a YouTube video, they might come across a quote from Xernona Clayton. What do you want that child, not even born yet, to know about you?
Well, I'd first, wherever I am, I hope I'm upstairs there somewhere. I hope,
Ordering folks around.
yeah. Well, I have to be in charge. First, I'd hope that my name would be somewhere, because I'm not sure it will. People, when you die, they say you die and they forget you. But I'd like to think, and I would hope they would say, that I acted like a Christian and I was a good patriot. I believe that we're going to have a great America, because I believe that people basically are good. My hopes are strong that we are going to have this great America. And I hope that I help change some negative attitudes somewhere along the way. I got one I can claim. Calvin Craig puts me in a good shape. And I do feed the hungry and clothe the naked, because that's part of the Christian duty. So I hope that somebody will see in those actions that maybe I was a pretty good person to have lived around. If they could have lived with me, that I'm a good person and I was worth knowing.
Well, of course you're worth knowing. It was great to know you.
And I belong here.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
It's always good to see you.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Love you.
Love you as well.